Hey, Ian. Okay, so just to capitalize on that conversation we were having, right? Keep the ball rolling. Let's start with pentatonic box one, so A minor pentatonic. You probably already know this scale, like most guitarists know it, they just don't know what to do with it. Just a quick 5/8, 5/7, 5/7, 5/7, 5/8, 5/8. If you need to, pause, rewind, go over it again. First step is get that box under your fingers, make sure you know the shape. Right. The next thing that's really important for us to acknowledge is that if you're playing this could be the scale of A minor, or it could be the scale of C major. And it would be really, really helpful for us to know where the A and the C is. So we're just going to deal with the A right now. I've got a backing track loaded up in A minor. So knowing the A's. A is here on the 5th fret, down the bottom. A is here on the 7th fret of the D string. And it's here on the 5th fret of the 1st string, right? A, and A. The reason that it's really good to know where they are is they're a great place to start and end ideas. One of the big problems we have initially improvising is that it doesn't feel like we have a cap an idea off, or it just feels like waffle against the notes. And a great place of making sure that we start tying things off in a nice way is just to end on that A. Another thing for us to acknowledge too is that generally speaking, things resolving down in pitch. This is kind of like gravitational crossover. You know, gravity pulls things to the floor. And music resolution kind of also feels nicer going down on the whole than it does going up. So going to this guy, you know, it's only ever going to feel like it's in the middle point of a phrase. Right? That sounds cool now because we went up, we waited for a bit, we're on an A, we can wait for as long as we want. A is pretty much always going to sound good inside the key of A minor. And then in order to let go of that big mountain that we climbed, come down back to our other A. Right? Speeds are not important, right? Don't worry about that I'm playing this fast, I'm just trying to get through the ideas. Okay, so knowing where this A is. Step number one, throw in your backing track. You're only allowed to use that A. Now all you gotta do is find rhythm, right? Here's our track. Alright, so I was just experimenting around with picking some rhythms. So you can start just downbeats if you want. Right, now I kind of feel like this could do with some ups, like a... Alright. We gotta start there because rhythm is the basis of all of our vocabulary, right? Like we start with rhythm. If we're not hearing rhythm patterns, then it's really hard for us to construct any other kind of line, right? So, grab one note, grab the A. I'm grabbing the A in the middle because it gives us options to go down or it gives us options to go up. Any of the A's will work for this, just the A. Play it out of rhythm, then you're allowed one more note, all right? Now, slow steps towards building something, right? What we're doing here is we're going to add one note to some of these rhythms, just one extra note from the scale, doesn't matter which one, we can try a whole bunch of different ones. But what we're trying to do is find one that we like the sound of, right? One that we relate to, we think, oh, that sounds kind of cool, right? We're also trying to think a little bit, if we can, about the way these make us feel. Some of these will feel really solid and resolved. Some of them are going to feel quite weird. And we want to kind of take a note of that. Like if we go... that one's probably going to feel odd to us until we learn what to do with that. So initially, that might be one to avoid, right? Later on, we'll learn how to use that. And as we add more notes, some of these weirder ones start sounding cooler. So, first step, just one, right? Find a rhythm pattern, start getting inside the groove. Then we're going to start trying out some other notes. So here's what that would sound like. That third sounds pretty cool, right? What about going down? That sounds pretty cool too. Right, let's go further down. That was a little weird, right? That fourth, hard to figure out. Kind of like that third again, right? That third, either up here, or... still sounds pretty good either way. And we're left with... sounds pretty good. A's always sound good. Coming up, all right. Really like that third. Here's the fourth. It's all right for now. Fifth. Oh, the fifth is cool, right? Okay, seventh. Little weird, just like the fourth, little weird. Feels like it needs something else to make it work, right? That's a kind of flavor that it's like, oh, it needs to be balanced out, right? Like, it's all too rich, it needs some acid. Or maybe it's all too acid, it needs some richness. Root. Okay, root sounds pretty good. So out of that, I think I have a preference. Your preferences might be different, it does not matter which ones you choose. But I think I really like the third, the fifth the most, right? In both directions. So the third or the fifth in both directions. Right, well, let's say that fifth. I thought that one kind of overall sounded the coolest. The third thing was really great. It felt really solid as a stop point. But I think for developing something that's about to say something, there's an openness in that fifth, which gives us kind of more of a sense of mystery, something we could fill in. Now, there's a soft rule in music that says when we do a big leap, and this is starting to get big, it's half an octave, right? We're supposed to fill in the space in between the leaps. So we shouldn't go and try to come up the scale. We should try to fill in the gap that we just did. Ooh, that's starting to sound good. It has that same flavor as the fifth we started on, but now we can just fill in the gap in between. So that's now going to be my new improvisation exercises. I like this fifth. I'm going to try it in different rhythms, and I'm going to experiment with putting in extra notes in between. Starting with just one note. So here's that fifth again, just reset the fifths a couple times to get the groove. All right, let's add one note in between. Right, a different note. It's a little bit more tense, isn't it, than the last one? Right, what about both of them? Starting to sound cool. Now, after we've explored just some of the notes in the scale in between those destinations, we can start adding things that are outside the scale. Because what's important is that we have this leap and that we close the distance of that gap. So we could do things like use things outside the scale, like, right? That sounds really spicy here, but I bet it's going to sound kind of cool. Right? Really spicy, but kind of cool. What about chromatic? Still sounds cool, right? Right, now it's getting real complicated, right? But you notice that the basic framework is still just me exploring this fifth, right? And we could sit here for the next, 10 minutes of this jam track and just keep trying to think of different ways of connecting these 2 points. Sometimes you might say, connect them directly. And that sounds good in one way. You might connect them chromatically the whole way. Sorry, I went down and came back up again. Let's just do chromatic. Sorry. Right? And that will also sound good, even though there's a lot of notes in there that aren't in the scale, because the start point and the end point is good. The rest of it will tend to make sense to our ear. Right? I'll show you that chromatic one against the track. I know you're probably not going to do a huge amount of the chromatic stuff. It's mostly a point to show out that, provided we're joining those dots, we can do a lot of stuff and it will pretty much all sound good. And the thing for you to do for your improvisation practice is to play with those things. How far outside the box can I go, right? Here's the chromatic one against the music. 3, 4, and up. Right? Still sounds pretty cool. especially if we mixed it in with some basic stuff, right? So we go like, right? Like, sounds cool. The next thing that's hyper important for you as a singer especially, and I probably should have started with stressing this, but a lot of the time when we get going on guitar work, we want to use our fingers first. But the most important thing is that we're trying to memorize the sounds of these pitches. So a great exercise for you to engage with too is making sure you practice singing pentatonic scales. At the very least, singing the pitches, right? So like if I play this note, I should be able to sing the next note of the scale. Boo, da, 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 right? Until we run out of range. Usually just drop down an octave. I tend to like to try to get up there. Now, if you're doing really good work with the oral training and you're singing that scale, it's worthwhile to learn the lyrics of that scale. Now, those lyrics could be the notes, but for us, notes are not as important as intervals. Intervals are really the way that the guitarists figure out the neck, more so than a specific note. So instead of going A, C, E, D, G, I'm going to go 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, 1. And then after I can do that, 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, 1, in out loud, without my guitar, I would then work on vocally improvising between destinations, like 1, 1, flat 7, 4, 5, 1, flat 3, 1, flat 7, 1. And the more I can get control orally of that scale, the easier it is for me to guess where the note I'm looking for is. So that's a whole bunch of stuff. There's probably hours and hours worth of practice in that. So just to recap, learn fingering for the scale. Once you've learned the fingering for a scale, figure out where the root note of the key is. Once you have that root note of the key, play around with rhythm and just using that. Because remember, a lot of how we hear music, a lot of how we improvise music, starts with rhythm. So if we can get groovy on one note with a rhythm, if we just throw in other notes from the pentatonic scale, almost at random, it will still sound good and still sound like something that's worth going over. After we've played with just the root note and rhythm, we then start adding notes. We try out a whole bunch of other notes one at a time in the scale, see if there's any there that we relate to, that we think, yeah, that immediately sparks something. I have some ideas there. If nothing happens, then just choose one at random and start trying to make it work. I believe you're an experienced musician who has some preferences already, so you'll probably gravitate towards things like fifths, octaves, and thirds just because they sound really nice. And then after we've started doing that, we try to expand that gap. So we went for a fifth in this 15 minutes. And then after we went for a fifth, it was trying to fill in the gap in between the fifth. Right? Anything we can do to essentially have these two notes that we liked the feel of, and then add stuff around it, ornament those two notes. Okay, hopefully that's not too scary a start, and hopefully it gives you some ideas on what to go through. I'd love to hear anything you got. Like if you do take this and you do a bit, love to see you shoot a video back in response if you're doing some of the stuff. Even if your whole thing is like, I tried, look, step one, and it all fell apart, where am I going wrong? That would be a great thing for me to hear. All right, mate, hope you have fun.